Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're dissecting something that sits right at the very core of our daily existence. Yet, honestly, it's a concept most of us completely misunderstand. We're diving into the architecture of personal identity. And look, this is a topic that challenges a really comfortable illusion we all walk around with. You know, we often just cruise through life assuming that who we are is this static, unchangeable fact. It's kind of like moving into a fully furnished apartment and just pretending we built all the furniture ourselves. But what if the identity you hold so tightly isn't actually yours at all? What if the things you think define you, the labels, the affiliations, what if they're just the external scaffolding and you haven't actually built the building inside yet? Now sure, scaffolding is totally necessary to start construction, but it's meant to come down eventually so the true structure can stand on its own, right? So today, we're going to examine the stark difference between the comfortable illusion of who we think we are and the deliberate, often difficult reality of what we actually build.
Okay, let's dive into this. Who are you really? Now, it seems like a simple icebreaker, right? The kind of casual question you'd get at a dinner party. But I want you to strip away your immediate instinctual answers for a second. Think about the very first things that pop into your head when someone asks you to define yourself. Are those things active choices you've made, or are they entirely passive circumstances? To truly answer this, we've got to draw a hard line in the sand between an identity that is actively constructed and one that is just entirely passive. We basically have to ask ourselves, are we actively navigating the world as self-authored individuals, or are we just floating along on a current, relying completely on the traits, the labels, and the circumstances we were just handed the moment we were born? Now, I know it's a deeply uncomfortable question to wrestle with, because it strips away our usual defenses. But honestly, answering it, that is the first absolutely crucial step to actual self-awareness.
So that brings us to our first major conceptual hurdle, the illusion of group identity. Look, there's a natural, almost magnetic human tendency here. We instinctively seek out groups. We join movements, we immerse ourselves in communities, and we adopt collective ways of thinking. And honestly, it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint. It feels good and it feels safe. It provides an immediate, out-of-the-box sense of belonging and this pre-packaged sense of self without any of the heavy lifting. However, being part of a movement or a community is fundamentally not your actual identity. Group thinking is literally by definition a collective experience, but identity in its truest form is a solitary architecture. It requires individual blueprints. When you adopt a group's identity as your own and let it speak for you, you're essentially renting someone else's house instead of laying the bricks for your own. You're outsourcing the hard, intricate work of defining yourself right over to a crowd.
Which brings us to what we can call false identifiers. We're talking about things like your birthplace, your caste, creed, religion, or the various movements you might join. Now, impartially speaking, these are incredibly powerful forces in human society. In fact, psychologists have found that humans can form intense group loyalty in literally a matter of minutes based on something as arbitrary as a coin toss. It's a phenomenon known as the minimal group paradigm. We naturally want to belong, but there is a vital distinction to be made here. These factors are projected onto you. They come to you by virtue of your ancestors, by the sheer chance of geography, or sometimes by the overwhelming force of the culture surrounding you. You didn't earn the geography of your birth. You didn't earn the family creed you were handed as a kid. They are circumstances. And while circumstances absolutely shape your starting line in life, they do not equate to a personal identity. They're the background, not the character.
There's a profound challenge to how society operates in the source material, and it goes exactly like this. Creating your pride and identity around what you were born with is the weakest form of developing one's character and personality. Let that sit for a second. It's a direct strike at the way we are so often conditioned to think, isn't it? We see so much pride in the world centered entirely around the accidents of birth. We celebrate boundaries we didn't draw and legacies we didn't write. But clinging to these inherited traits fundamentally stunts true personal growth. Because think about it. If your entire character is wrapped up in something you did absolutely nothing to earn, you are essentially left in a state of arrested development. It's described as the weakest form of personality development because it requires absolutely zero internal heavy lifting. It's like claiming the trophy without ever actually running the race.
This naturally leads us into the trap of inheritance. Why is it so incredibly common to base our identity on these unearned traits? Well, simply put, human beings have a deep-seated tendency to take the easy road. It is remarkably easy to rely on the things we're simply gifted. If you're born into a certain group that comes with immediate pride, respect, or a predefined worldview, accepting that gift is utterly effortless. But here's the trap. These gifts provide the illusion of character. They give you an identity without requiring the three essential ingredients of true character, which are effort, struggle, and suffering. When you rely solely on inherited traits, your character has never been stress tested. And an identity built without those three fundamental elements
effort, struggle, and suffering is incredibly fragile when it finally faces the real world.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between these two paths. An inherited identity is driven by chance, literally a roll of the dice at birth. It relies on unearned gifts and societal forces pushing you in a certain direction. And, it might look remarkably solid from the outside, but it is ultimately hollow because the foundation hasn't been poured by you. True identity, however, requires the anvil and the hammer. It demands effort, struggle, and suffering. A character devoid of these elements simply hasn't been forged yet. True identity is shaped in the fires of your own individual experiences. It's chiseled out of the times you had to try and fail, the moments you had to struggle against the grain of popular opinion, and the suffering you endured and actually managed to overcome. That forging process is what gives an identity its density and its undeniable actual worth. Okay, let's move to and see how this builds into something incredible. This critique of what identity isn't actually reveals an incredibly empowering vision of what it is. We're moving away from the passive acceptance of labels and stepping right into the realm of active construction. True identity is a completely unique architecture, and the absolute most exciting part is that you are the architect. It's constructed actively, day by day, decision by decision. You aren't just a blank canvas that society gets to paint on, you are the artist making deliberate strokes. This realization completely shifts the paradigm of how we view ourselves. It means that whoever you are today, right at this exact moment, is simply a work in progress. It means you possess the profound power and, frankly, the profound responsibility to stop accepting passive labels and start deliberately building the structure of your own character.
So, this is the true architecture of character. It's such a fascinating concept because it injects so much vital energy and agency back into our lives. Your identity is an entirely unique blueprint. No one else in the world has your exact layout. But just like a grand, intricate building, it doesn't just magically appear out of thin air, right? It requires deliberate, often painstaking construction. You have to lay the foundation, frame the walls, and carefully choose the materials that are going to withstand the elements. And unlike a prefab house, you don't get an instruction manual for this. It requires you to step away from the comforting noise of the crowd, to step away from the easy inheritances, and do the hard, solitary work of figuring out what your unique structure is actually going to look like from the ground up.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we need. To build this architecture, you really only need 3 distinct materials. First up, the values you live by. And to be totally clear, this isn't about the values you say you have, but the ones you actually demonstrate when things get difficult and the pressure is on. Second, your core beliefs about life. These are the fundamental truths you've arrived at through your own personal effort and experience, not just what a group or a community told you to believe. And third, your way of thinking and behaving in the world. How do you process new information? How do you treat the people around you? How do you react to adversity? This specific, highly individualized combination of active beliefs, tested values, and chosen behaviors, these are the sole architectural pillars of your true identity. Nothing else holds the roof up.
So, the crucial point is this final question. If you stripped away everything you were simply born with, your geography, your inherited affiliations, the labels placed on you by chance or by force, what is actually left? What have you actively built through your own effort, your own unique struggle, and your own deliberate choices? It's a deeply challenging thought to leave you with, but I think it's also an incredibly empowering one. Because if you look inside and find that the building is a little bare right now, well, the great news is that you are the architect. The blueprint is in your hands and you can start building your true identity today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some deep, fascinating introspection as you go about your day.